My own parents threw me out like last week's trash. No job, no roof, and apparently no family. They thought they'd washed their hands of me, left me scrambling to survive, but they had no idea who was about to be in charge of their future rent. Let's just say I wasn't about to let this slide without a little payback. My name's Tom, 26 years old, and yeah, you read that right. My own parents kicked me out of the house. Imagine this. I just lost my job, so money was tight. I was scraping by, barely covering my part of the bills, but I thought, hey, they're my parents. They'll understand, right? Wrong. One night, they sat me down, looked me dead in the eye, and told me I needed to rethink my life choices. Then, just as I was still processing that bomb, they handed me a box and pointed at the door. Their own son. Standing there, staring at the closed door, I was in shock. It felt like some twisted joke. Like any second they'd open the door and say, "Just kidding." But nope, they meant it. They actually kicked me out. I'll be honest, it was a slap in the face. The people who were supposed to be my backup, the ones who were supposed to have my back, just turned on me. As I was lugging my box of stuff down the street, only one thought circled in my mind. How do I get back at them? You'd think I'd be too focused on finding a new place to live, but nah, revenge was way too tempting. It didn't take long for a plan to form. So, I call up my old friend Jess. Now, Jess is one of those people who always knows what's going on in town, especially when it comes to real estate. She's got the kind of connections that get stuff done. I explained the situation, and she was immediately in, already flipping through listings to check if anything related to my parents popped up. And here's the kicker. It turns out they'd put the house up for sale over a month ago. Yeah, they were already planning to cash out and move somewhere warmer, like the whole kick your kid out thing was some midlife project. That's when it hit me. I could actually buy the house. I had a small fund stashed away and some savings I'd intended to use later. I called up a few people Jess knew at the bank, and it turned out that my credit was good enough to handle the mortgage. Before I knew it, I was signing the paperwork and officially becoming the new owner of the house I'd just been thrown out of. The irony was priceless. Did I tell my parents? Absolutely not. Why ruin the surprise? Once the deal was done, I sat there with the paperwork spread out in front of me, double-checking each line with a grin the size of Texas. I officially owned the house my parents threw me out of, and they had absolutely no idea that their new landlord was none other than me. And let me tell you, I wasn't planning to go easy on them. First move, I sent them a friendly little letter informing them of a rent increase. Not just a little bump either. I tripled the rent. Yep, you heard that right. I knew they'd never find a place that nice for anything close to that price, so they were stuck. I didn't have to wait long for the fallout. My phone rang the very next day. It was Dad, voice all controlled and polite, asking to speak with the new owner. I kept my voice as professional as possible, giving him the whole, "I'm sorry, sir, but the rate is final." Oh, he tried to talk me down, all the classic moves. He even threw in, "I'll be forced to move out if I can't get a better rate." Now, knowing their credit score was less than stellar, I just said, "That's a shame, sir, but these are the new terms." You could practically feel his frustration through the phone. After a few seconds of heavy silence, he muttered, "Fine," and hung up. I was practically bouncing off the walls. The fact that they'd been thrown off by this landlord they'd never seen before was pure gold. But they didn't stop there. Next thing I know, they're talking to lawyers, planning to challenge the rent hike. I mean, the nerve, right? Here they were, fully ready to toss me out on the street, and now they're acting all hurt because the landlord decided to get a little strict. I kept my cool, though, knowing they didn't stand a chance. When my parents finally lawyered up, they probably thought they had me cornered. They couldn't believe I'd actually managed to snag a mortgage, as if the bank wouldn't even consider me without a 9-to-5 gig. I mean, come on. Sure, my job situation was a bit in flux, but I had a solid plan and some savings to back me up. They had no idea who they were dealing with. So there we are, sitting in some high-rise office with their lawyer and mine, and my parents look across the table with these smug little smiles, clearly thinking they've already won. I didn't say much at first. I just let my lawyer do his thing, laying out how the sale was totally above board. And when we got to the part where he mentioned that the loan was secured and the payments were a breeze for me, let's just say their expressions did a full 180. Mom's face was priceless. She looked like she'd just bitten into a lemon. Then they tried to go the reasonable route. They leaned in, all smiles now, asking if there was some way to negotiate. They even threw out the word family, like that was going to melt my heart or something. Dad's like, "We'd be happy to stay if you could be just a little more flexible on the rent." Yeah, flexible? Sure. I gave them my best considerate landlord face and said, "Well, we could discuss a slight reduction if you commit to timely payments and agree not to challenge any further changes." They knew they were trapped. Agreeing to my terms was pretty much admitting they had no real chance in court, and I wasn't about to let them wriggle out of it. By the end of the meeting, they were furious. I could see it in Dad's tight jaw, the way he clenched his fists just under the table. The house that had been their fortress, their pride and joy, was now in my hands. The kid they thought they could toss aside without a second thought. I could feel the sweet taste of payback, and it was better than anything I'd imagined. But just when I thought I'd won, they started planning their next move, their faces full of resolve. The game wasn't over yet, not by a long shot. My parents called, asking to meet up in person. I knew they were serious. I could hear that edge in Dad's voice, like he'd been rehearsing some grand speech. So there we were, in the old living room, just the three of us, me, Mom, and Dad, gathered in what was technically my house now. I had all the cards, and it was time to show them exactly what they were holding, which was nothing. I set a neat stack of papers on the coffee table, took a breath, and laid it out. "So, here's the deal," I said, flipping the mortgage agreement right in front of them. "This house, it belongs to me now. I'm the one responsible for the mortgage payments, the taxes, the whole package, which also means I set the rent and I enforce the terms." I kept my face as neutral as possible, but I could see the color drain from Mom's face as reality hit. Dad tried to keep his cool, but he looked like he'd just lost a prize fight. And then, just to twist the knife a little more, I told them, "Look, I'm not totally heartless. I'll drop the rent back down a bit. If you can manage a public apology, a real one. You'll need to own up to the way you treated me, and then maybe we can work something out." Their reaction? Complete denial. They sat up straighter, staring at me like I was the one being unreasonable. Mom scoffed. Actually, just scoffed, and Dad crossed his arms, looking down his nose at me. "We'd rather pay someone else than bow down to you," he snapped. I could see the pride just radiating off of them. It didn't matter to them that they'd have to start fresh in some other rental. The idea of bending even a little to their own son was clearly out of the question. That was it. No begging, no bargaining. They'd made up their minds. Within a week, they'd packed up and left, leaving the place as empty as they'd left me feeling. That day, they kicked me out. As they drove off, I stood at the window watching, feeling a weird sense of calm. They'd been my family, but they'd chosen pride over a second chance. Sure, the mortgage was my responsibility now, and every payment was a reminder. But that house? It was proof that I'd stood up for myself, that I'd turned the tables.